Welcome to Christa Spiritual Talks. Today we have our guest Donna Beker. Is that correct?
That's
Becker?
correct.
Donna has had a lifelong passion for science and spirituality and has dedicated years to the study and practice of mediumship and tarot. Influenced by her intuitive grandfather, her journey began in childhood but deepened after retiring from a 30-year career in cardiovascular research. Wow. A former co-author of science journal publications, she now writes about metaphysical experiences, contributing to The Last Breath 2020, and it looks like you had a second edition in 2024. Okay, I'm going to ask you about that. Sounds really interesting. And working on Prairie Flower, a mystery about psychic farm girl growing up in the 1960s, Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan.
Thank you. Donna has spent a decade honing her craft with respect to mentors, including those from Arthur Findlay College. She offers evidential mediumship and tarot readings both virtually and in person while upholding the highest standard of credibility and professionalism. Very important. Co-founder of Third Eye Mystics, www.thirdeyemystics.com. She has taught tarot courses and workshops for over a decade alongside her daughter-in-law and fellow medium Erin Knight. And then it just says passionate about. And I missed that part, so sorry about that. But
That's fine.
you've done a lot. Um, Anything comes to mind after saying all that, or
Well, it's funny when you kind of sum it up like that because, I'm in my 60s now. So when I look back on things, you're like, I never thought it'd actually be a medium. It's crazy when I think about this is what I'm doing now, because of my background was in science, but
Mhm.
also it was interesting because I always had a fascination with the metaphysical as well. So, I mean, I always liked going to psychics and I was always very interested in that kind of thing. And as I mentioned in the bio, I that kind of came from my grandfather, who was also psychic. And back in the early days, I was probably 5 or 6.
Mhm.
Um, I got into a big fight on the swing with this other kid.
Mhm.
And my mom says to me, "What is your problem?" And I said, "Well, this kid won't let me have the swing." But there wasn't any other kid there that she saw.
Oh,
And I was
okay.
losing my mind because this kid wouldn't let me have the swing. And my mom, without missing a beat, said, "Well, you just learn how to share." And
Good for
so,
her.
right. And I mean, because a lot of times people would have right away said, "Well, there's nobody there." But she just was kind of used to, I think that with from her dad, she kind of was aware of that kind of spiritual world, as it were. And so that I never felt like this was something I should be afraid of or, hide. I wouldn't say I wasn't afraid of it, but I didn't feel like I needed to hide it. And and my grandfather was the one who said, "Well, she sees spirit. This is what's happening." Because he could feel it too. I think this is probably the case.
So it sounds like you didn't have to hide that aspect like a lot of people might have growing,
That's right.
but you spent 30 years cardiovascular
Well, I,
research.
I mean, yeah.
How,
Like, I mean, I used it for like the psyche aspect made sense. I used that all the time. That was just an awareness of things that were going on. I remember, I don't know, it must have been about, I guess, 11, junior high, or no, it would be elementary school still. And, you're in a school, there's an auditorium, we're all sitting there for some kind of assembly, and the principal's at the front. And my friend sitting beside me, and I looked and I went, "Oh, you're going to win an award. They're going to announce it right away." And they called her name and she went up to get the award and she comes back kind of stunned looking, going, "How did you know?" And I just thought, I don't know, I just did. Like to me, it was, I thought everybody had that ability because of the fact that you were just allowed to experience that. Like as a kid, I was allowed to express that feeling or have those feelings, and I wasn't really challenged for it. But I was a bit of an odd kid because I really did feel there was like I really wanted to know about God, or I wanted to know, I felt like there was something more. And my mother wasn't really religious, so I would make my dad take me to church
now,
because I wanted to figure it out.
At what point did you realize that you might be a little different from?
I think probably when I hit junior high, because that was when, you're really, that's when I kind of like, maybe I'll keep that to myself, right? And and then my father passed away when I was 15. So that was when life took kind of a big turn. And I ended up getting married at 16. And so really then life got real to me. So I put away those other things because I didn't have time, even though I felt the spirit world still, I didn't really focus on it because, and also I was a little afraid of it. Like I was fine with the psychic aspect, where you like, oh, watch, you got to watch, there's a car ahead or something like that. That was just useful. That's instinct to me. I could see the biological need for that as mothers. We can feel that sometimes with our kids or just a sense of sometimes you have a man who has a really good business, instinct. And I feel like, well, that's actually intuition, right? We just give it a safer name.
Right, right.
So the reason I ended up, I think, shutting it down for a while was because all of a sudden now I was in a marriage and kids and it just got too busy and it was too hard to focus on the other world. I needed to focus on this world. And, um, and it really does, to me, it is like two separate, like it's definitely two different things. And I felt that after my father passed, I mean, I used to get a lot dreams. So that's often how it would come to me. So it was nice and safe getting it in dreams. It wasn't scary. And I remember my father coming to me in the dream and saying, "Oh, there's life after death." And I just thought, okay, good. We have that figured out. We know we're good.
Right.
And I was 15 then. So there was just that sense of knowing, I guess. So I was lucky in that regard where I know a lot of people had somebody die later in life, and that's when it really awoke, became uh, prominent, the mediumship part. But with me, when I had to actually go back to school because, of course, I got married really young at 16. I was divorced by 26.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back to school and went into biological sciences and ended up working at the university in cardiovascular research. So then I really had to be careful because I needed to be credible. So you can't start talking about spirits, you can't start talking about woo-woo stuff, right? So I would feel it, but I would kind of keep it to myself. But it was interesting because I still used it in my everyday work because it would, like, for instance, I'd be in my lab and all of a sudden I'd think, oh, it feels like I'm going to be getting some kind of inspection or something because they would do these, kind of surprise inspections sometimes to make sure your lab was, safety conscious, all this. And I would kind of like, I should check my books, make sure everything's good. I would get it all set up, check, oh yeah, everything's good, close it, put it aside, in they'd walk. So I didn't get caught off guard. I had a really good innate sense of working with people. I kind of knew what they needed. Sometimes I would just have stuff ready, like my boss would say to me, "Oh, I would really love to see a report on." Well, actually, I have one made. I kind of was thinking about the same thing.
Yeah.
He was just always kind of like right in line with what he was asking for. And they could never figure out how come, but it was because of the intuitive abilities that you use in everyday life, right?
Exactly. So how long ago was it that you retired from that and started getting more into the metaphysical side?
Right. So I retired in let's see, 2020. And I actually did start working with it before then. So I'd say it was about 5 or 6 years before I retired. So it was probably about 50. And well, yeah, around 50, a little bit older. And it was interesting because I started getting a lot of activity in my home. Like all of a sudden, spirits were really starting. Like for instance, I guess I would start at work first. Would go to work, we'd sit in a cafeteria, and all of a sudden I couldn't catch my breath. And of course, this is a hospital cafeteria.
Mhm.
So, because our university was attached to a hospital, and I just couldn't figure out why can't I breathe? So I would get up and walk away sometimes from the hospital, and then I'd be fine, catch my breath. And I thought, well, I must be having anxiety attacks, or you're looking for the logical explanation. So I went and had tests and all this other stuff. They're like, no, you're fine. Like,
Huh.
what your problem is. And it would happen in restaurants too. So eventually, how did it work? I guess, yes, I was home alone one time. My husband was out of town working, and I'm kind of sleeping, and all of a sudden I felt a sit on my bed. And I rolled over and I saw a spirit just as like I see you. And it
Hmm.
was just an old lady looking at me like this, And I thought, whoa, okay, yeah, this is happening. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that because, I was okay with the psychic stuff, but I didn't know if I don't know this person. They're not saying who they are, but it was almost telepathy where they're saying, you're okay, you're safe, it's fine. And I was just like, yeah, I don't know about that. I want you to go. And they were gone like that. And of
Right.
course, I was up, like that was it. You're like, okay, this is getting, and I couldn't really explain it. I thought, well, maybe I was just in a dream state because I'm really looking for the logical explanation.
Rationalization. Yeah.
Yes, well, because I've been in science now, so it's like I have to rationalize stuff. But I still had that piece of me that knew, no, no, this is real. Something's happening. And so then that day, it was all day long. I went downstairs, the TV flicked on, like it was just really crazy stuff happening. And I thought, well, maybe I hit the remote. Like I was looking for real logical things. And it didn't scare me, but it was like waking me up to like something's bigger is happening here.
Right.
And then two weird things that happened after that. We ended up going to Niagara Falls, and I went to see a psychic. A friend of mine had never been to one. I said, "Oh, they're fun. Come see one." They always tell me I'm going to read cards, which was really weird to me. They always say, "Oh, you're going to read tarot," and I'm thinking, "That's never going to happen." And so we're sitting there, and of course, the woman brings that up, and then she says to me, "Oh, spirits want to speak through you, but they won't if you're afraid." And I went, "Okay, well, I'll stay afraid because I don't know if I want spirits speaking through me." I couldn't see how this would work in my life. Like, what
Right.
was the point? I
Right.
didn't quite get that. And this is why I was having so much, like I was feeling the spirit when I was in restaurants and when I was sitting down in a hospital where people have passed. So I was feeling them because that was why I couldn't catch my breath at times. And once I acknowledged this through, after speaking to other mediums who might have had experiences, I was able to kind of sit there and go, oh, this is where this is coming from. This is not me. Let me just relax a second, and I could realize, oh no, it's from that person. Okay, well, this is not a good time for me to be feeling this. I'm not going to give any messages right now. Maybe you need to find a way to get that person to come to me, but this isn't happening right now. And that feeling would just lift off. And
Okay.
then I realized, this is what it is. And since that time, once I actually had some awareness of this is what I was feeling, I don't get that anymore. I can go to restaurants now, no problem. I can go, like sometimes I might still get a bit of a whiff of it. I'm like, no. And that's with training, right? You start to understand
Right. What's happening? Right.
that's right. And I mean, because it's scary initially if you're not sure why this is happening to you, and it can be alarming. But
Right.
once you realize it, then you're like, okay, this is how it is. So then you have to learn how to work with that and how to just kind of close it off or, you know, so it's working on my time. They're
So
not.
at this point, did you start doing tarot or were you?
Yeah, I was studied with tarot for a long time, just kind of on my own. I was always interested in it, but I actually started reading people with regular cards. So what happened was once I started to talk to that psychic in Niagara Falls, I decided maybe I should look into it, maybe get some training. So I had taken a psychic development course, just a little one by a local person here, and it kind of introduced me to a whole new circle, right? I met like-minded people.
Mhm.
And so she was the one who suggested just using playing cards. And that really turned me on. That works for me because I'm very visual. I would see things and that helped. So I remember being at the university, sometimes stuff would slip out. So here at one time, I'm sitting with a bunch of docs at the table, and we're just all having conversations. And all of a sudden, I told one that I'd been good friends with. I said, "Well, actually, I'm kind of working on my psychic development, like this." And he goes, "Really? Oh, ask my mom if I can have a dog." And I said, "Oh, it doesn't work that way." And as I said it, outside of his body came this like beam of, I don't know, it was like light particles or something. I was drinking coffee and I damn near dropped it because it was like, what the hell is that? Right. And I he knew something was wrong, but I was like, I couldn't speak because I was like, this was something I had never seen before or since. But it was letting me know that, oh, yes, his mom will let him know if he wants a dog.
And not that many people get those solid visuals too. You know what I
Yeah, that
mean?
was
That's
very something that was, it doesn't happen a lot, but it would happen. I think it had to happen in the early days to convince me this
Mhm.
was something real.
Right.
Because I was skeptical, it had to be more forceful. And I really think that's why. So just because you don't see something like that doesn't mean you're not a medium. It just means in my case, it took a little more convincing, you know.
Right.
And I never did tell him that I saw his mom. Like I just kept that on the down low. It was like, I'm not, okay, that's a little too far. I'm not going to let him know that, yeah, I'm seeing stuff coming out of your body. I was like, I'll keep that to myself.
Yeah, we have to make a living and all that kind of stuff. So you go from being a co-author in science journals to writing a book, The Last Breath in 2020.
Mhm.
So at the same time, you did write that book. What was the motivation, or what is this book about?
Um, well, that book transpired. I think I was already retired. So now I could focus my attention on that. And
Okay.
so this book is a collaboration with quite a few different mediums. This is what it looks like. It's called The Last Breath.
Uh-huh.
And there are different stories from different mediums about their experiences. Sometimes it's about how they became a medium. Sometimes it's just a lovely story about their connection with maybe somebody they know who's passed. Mine's called Born This Way. And so it just talks about how not everybody is aware of it as a child and is allowed to stick with it. But
Mhm.
I was allowed to stick with it. And this is why I think sometimes um, the psychic part of it is it just kind of feels natural to me. And it's interesting because it fits biologically for me too, because sometimes um, I would get a vibe on, oh, I'm going to turn this corner and I'm going to run into somebody that I know. And
Mhm.
I would turn the corner and there they were, and I knew who it was going to be. But to me, I thought, well, perhaps there is, pheromones or maybe some kind of a deeper instinct or biological piece of me was able to sense the smell or maybe your eyes see something that you're not registering yet.
Mhm.
So it wasn't always very like I didn't see it as foo-foo. I thought it as, well, this is just a biological, you know, uh, aspect of myself that maybe I'm not fully aware of.
Do you ever watch Greg Braden's stuff or read his books, or because he comes from a science background too? And I do think we live at a time where science and spirituality are coming together.
I think so too. They're really starting to mesh. And I mean, we've seen studies where, where they're looking at the brain and they're starting to see like impulses turned on when people are doing something psychic or like, they have them in where they're actually monitoring them as they work psychically or
Mhm.
with mediumship. And it's very interesting. And I know a lot of times, when people when you fall into that deep sleep and they will call it like, that sleep paralysis and things happen and they might see the hag or something like this. Um, it's interesting that if you look at all sorts of cultures, everybody kind of sees and describes the same thing.
Well, it's like quantum physics. I don't totally wrap my brain around it. Maybe more with a science brain, you can help with that. And I understand there's different dimensions and realities. But to me, like my brain can't, it doesn't grasp it totally. So that,
Well, that's true. Like even for myself, like because I work in cardiovascular research, that's a totally different kind of science
right,
than
right.
quantum physics, right? Like where you're talking about two different fields of study, and I find I'm now really interested in that other field of study, right? Because it's kind of aligning with what's happening to me, or it's like what's going on when you connect to the spirit world, because it's a very different experience than connecting just soul to soul or just becoming aware of things that are happening around you. And I'm really curious about uh, where that information is coming from, how it's coming.
So when you ended your career in research and then moved into more the metaphysical, did you experience, in native terms, they would call it the red road, or where things just kind of open up for you? Or what was your experience? Did you feel more in alignment with your purpose here? Or,
I would say so. And when I kind of missed talking about, like, when we were talking about the tarot actually opened up my mediumship. So as I worked with tarot, because it started off with the cards where I was doing that for, sometimes I would do it for people at work, and it was like I was selling drugs, I swear. They would come around and go, I hear you do readings. Like, all secretive, like really afraid anybody else is going to hear,
yeah,
but could you do one for me? So in the beginning, this is what I would do. I would read their cards, and then eventually I finally felt I knew enough about tarot that I could use them. And I really loved, as I worked with tarot, I would put down a card and I would all of a sudden sense their father stepping forward. And the more I worked with tarot, maybe it's because it relaxed me enough that I was able to kind of now allow the spirit world to kind of step in as well. And it was like I felt a connection. And initially, when I would do a reading, it would all start with, like, tarot or psychic, and I might get 5 minutes of mediumship. And then the more I worked, all of a sudden I was doing more mediumship than I was the psychic and the tarot piece. It was like it transformed or switched, and I started to just feel the spirit world step in first. And sometimes they would stay a long time, and sometimes they wouldn't. It would just depend. I mean, and then once you work with mentors and you start to develop your mentor, like you take on a mentorship or something, you start to develop your abilities. That evolves as well. Like, now, if somebody sits in front of me, it really depends what their soul needs. That's kind of how you're going to respond to what they need. So it might be psychic, it might be mediumship. Definitely, I always kind of give a tarot reading as well because I enjoy tarot. I
yeah.
love to teach tarot. I love the imagery of tarot because I'm a storyteller, so I enjoy the pictures.
What made you decide to go to Arthur Findlay College?
I didn't. It's my mentors were from there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I didn't go to Arthur Findlay College, but my mentors were all trained from the Arthur Findlay College. Yeah.
Okay.
So I would love to go there one day, but no, I haven't made it there yet. So, but I have been mentoring for about 5 years, in a one-on-one mentorship and things like that. So, and I think it's important to get training too, because it really helps you to, I think, clarify things and really, get a focus. And when you're talking about passion or your purpose, I really feel fulfilled, I guess, when I'm doing a reading for someone and you're making a real connection, and I almost feel like there's healing going on. But I learn from that as well. It's not just them, we might be making connection with a particular spirit, but all of a sudden, uh, it's just how it unfolds. Sometimes it's like, oh, that just warmed my heart, or I feel something from that too.
Yeah, I've had the same experience.
Hmm.
So you're currently working on Prairie Flower.
Mm.
Is that your story?
Yeah, well, it's my story. It's a faction, I guess, a fiction based on a few facts. But
Uh-huh.
it's kind of takes the place in the 1960s, because that's actually, yeah, when I grew up. And I grew up on a prairie in Saskatchewan. And it's really talking about a child who is psychic and is kind of discovering her own gifts. But at the same time, there is a mystery. She comes across a grave on a farm, and she connects with the spirit that's there, and it's a young boy of about 12. And so she can see him, but nobody else can. So it kind of tells their story and kind of like figuring out how he died and what happened to him, and those kind of things. It's uh it's kind of a mystery story, but I've been working on it for a little while, and uh yeah, I'm hoping to get it finished. So it's kind of more directed, probably might be more for youth, like it depends on where the interest would be once I'm finished it, but we'll see. And it's kind of fun to write. I just really enjoy it. I've done a lot of short stories, but this is something where I'm finally trying to attempt to finish a novel.
You're certainly not sitting around in your retirement.
No, it's crazy. Like, we're developing tarot courses all the time, and we're teaching workshops and things like that. And the funny thing is, I actually work with my daughter-in-law, who is a medium.
Oh,
So
yes.
it
Yeah.
runs in the family, I guess you could say.
So you have the classes, plus you do tarot and evidential mediumship. Is there a certain type of person that's drawn to you, or is it just kind of a broad spectrum of people that come for different reasons?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, it does seem like it's majority's women. I get a lot of women who come to me. Probably, I don't know, it's broad spectrum, to be honest, of ages and stuff. I've had from, 20 to 80, the whole spectrum. Uh, Men, not so many men, because I do feel men struggle with that, dealing with that side of themselves that's not so black and white. But that's where my science background does help a lot because I understand that thinking. And so that's where I think the evidential piece is so important for them. So men do come too, but not as frequently as women. One thing I find is that when I very first started, women would send their husbands, but they weren't always easy reads because they weren't coming of their own free will, right?
Oh,
So it
yeah.
was always challenging a bit to kind of get past that hurdle of like, it's okay, you can relax. It's like, but since then, now I've kind of put it out there that I really want people to come of their own free will. Like it's great if somebody, um, you want to come for the first time, never been to a psychic, that's great. But you kind of need to want to come to just, have that desire, be open-minded, I guess is what I'm trying to say, to really to get a lot out of the experience.
I think
Don't
so.
you
You
find?
have to do your own work and that type of thing. Um, every journey, as much as it probably is more in alignment with what fulfills you, there's challenges too. What would you identify as one of the biggest challenges since retirement being in this field?
Hmm.
If you have one, you don't have to have one, but I was
No,
just,
no, I would say not being afraid to be wrong, like
mhm,
when you're doing mediumship. Uh, because the longer you've been doing it, there is a sense of like, well, I should just always be getting this right now. But
mhm,
every single encounter is different. It's unique. So it's going to come up with maybe a different set of challenges. So I think once you step out of your own way, things kind of unfold in an easier manner. So that's been a challenge to keep my brain out of it because when you're really analytical, like I can be, sometimes I'll feel something and I'll be like, for instance, you get a sense of a dog. All of a sudden, I feel like, okay, I have a dog, and oh, they owned a dog. Well, they must have owned a dog, and they must have did. My brain will be trying to solve that, where it's just a matter of like, just sit with it. No, they ran a dog sanctuary, or they, totally something different from
right.
what your brain's wanting to fill in the answers. It's like, well, this must mean this, and it's a surrendering. There's the challenge, just to surrender. Darn it,
I
and
I have the same problem because I'm a Libra and I can get it too much in the swords, the mental. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. As
Yeah.
soon as you're going to say that, oh, you're Queen of Swords. But there's that intellect that rules you, right? And
Right.
yeah, and I feel that too. I'm an Aries, so I'm also driven and can be kind of fiery at times and things like this. Uh, but I'm also very extremely curious about this. And what we do is fascinating to me.
It is, and you can never learn it all. And there's always another
No.
aspect where you can grow. Um, yeah, it is fascinating. And I think you're right on the mentorship. I have a friend who's trying to talk me into doing some of that too, because it's just a chance to expand what you already have, right? Yeah, which makes it
And
easy.
if you've developed your psychic abilities, it's really just one more thing. It's now opening yourself up to the spirit world, communicating with you, because at least now you understand how that altered state might feel, right? Because it is kind of an altered state, and I just find it all fascinating. I remember, and still lots of questions. I remember one time getting into my car, I'm on my way to work, and all of a sudden, I get this sense of my friend's, a very good friend of mine, her horse dying, having been killed by a wolf. And in my
Oh,
head, I'm hearing, oh, they had to put down. Meadow, and that was the horse's name. And went, what? Why would they have to do that? So it's like I'm having a conversation with myself in the car. Went, oh, that can't be right. Oh no, she got attacked by a wolf and all
Mhm.
this. So sure enough, I talked to my friend. Yes, they had put her down that morning. She'd been attacked by a wolf, and it was really, really traumatic. So my question was to myself, now, was that a spirit guide? Was that because there's no way she lived in a neighboring town, like, nowhere near me, 3 hours away. Was it because she was such a good friend that I bonded with her and it was her sense? Was it just a spirit telling me? Like it was really, I needed to know. It drove me crazy because I thought, like, how did I get that information? That was, and was the information coming from a guide? Was it coming from the horse? Because that horse, I rode it many times and it tried to buck me a few times and I blogged about it. So it was really curious. So these kind of things, they are what get me interested, excited. Like, why? What? 'Cause we don't know all the answers. We like to think we do, but I mean, we can only just explore so much, right?
Oh, I think it's fascinating. I love it. It's the most exciting thing, I think. Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Um,
And we won't know all the answers till we die.
I know. That's why it's like there's so much, it's just like it's so little. There's so much more, and I know that. You know what I
So
mean?
much more.
So much more. Do most people like do you ever do psychic fairs or is it mainly Zoom
Mhm.
where people come to your house or is it Zoom?
Well, I do lots on Zoom, like international clients that way, of course. Uh, I do some in person, like for local people if they want to come to me. Sometimes I get a lot of, maybe seniors, they're not good with technology, so they do prefer to come in person. And sometimes people just like that in-person feel. But
Right.
as a psychic medium yourself, you would know that when we connect, it doesn't really matter if it's over a
Right.
phone or Zoom, because the spirit knows, oh, this is my person you're going to talk to. I'm there. I'm there for you. So it
Right.
doesn't make a difference to us. But I find sometimes the client wants something like that. They want that person in the room with them. Although the younger generation is easier with the Zoom, they're better with technology, so they don't have an issue with it.
Right.
We do some fairs. We're doing actually a weekend workshop May 24th and 25th. It's going to be we call it Weekend with Spirit, and I'll do it with my daughter-in-law. And what we're going to do is the first day we'll be all focusing on journeying within. So we'll do a lot of meditations where we'll do some deep meditations, meet your spirit guides, that kind of thing. And then the second day, it's all we call it psychic play, and we work with intuitive um, development and try different modalities. And it's a really good introduction to people that wonder about it, because it's just for the day. But that's all done in person here in Edmonton, Alberta. So, because I'm in Canada. So that's um,
What was the date again? May
May 24th and 25th. Yeah,
Edmonton?
Edmonton, Alberta. Yep. So if you're living in Edmonton, come
I
on down.
but God, that sounds like a lot of fun. You know what I mean? Just more of a play
Mhm.
and light and not a big heavy thing. So
Well, we've had it for a long time. We psychic play. We used to do it out of my home for a long time. We'd have people come every 2 weeks, kind of thing, and we just practice different things and play. Just enjoy it, because I find sometimes you've got to get rid of that fear.
right,
Because if people are coming from a religious background or something, it feels like the devil's work or something like that. It's scary, right, to some people, because that was kind of what they were taught.
mhm.
So just realizing, no, it's all coming from love and light. Yeah, you're working with a higher energy. So,
When you hit on the integrity too, I think that's a big part of this. You know what I mean? Like working
mhm.
with people, because people don't know and they're like, is she for real or is she just scamming me? Or you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it is out there too,
Oh
So
yeah, you got to be careful. Like anytime somebody asks you for information,
yeah,
beforehand, or what are you here for me? What are you here
yeah,
for? What do you want to know? No, I don't work that way. Usually I don't let them ask questions. I say just reserve your questions till near the end of the reading. If I haven't touched on a question, then we'll talk about it, you know? But usually by the time I say, okay, do you have any questions? They, no, they're kind of all answered. And that was the goal because
Right.
I'm hoping that I'm connected with them enough that I can kind of touch the need that they need. And sometimes the need that they need. Sometimes there's information coming up. Maybe that's not what they came for initially, but they find out through the process of just discussion, we find out that like, okay, this actually is something I needed, you know,
And
and there
it's a
can be,
personal journey and you can't explain it. I think the person just has to experience it. And you just know when you haven't told anybody certain things and somebody's
that's right. Well,
spoken.
that's where the evidence piece comes out, right? Evidential mediumship, which is what I really love about mediumship is the evidence. You can't just tell me you have my grandmother. Tell me something about it. Oh,
Right.
would you know that she flew planes back in the war? Okay, well, that's not real common. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, so something like that. I remember one time I had a client, she was a young girl, she was probably early 20s or something, and or maybe even younger than, yeah, maybe 22, something like that. So she's sitting in front of me, and I felt her grandfather come through right away, but I saw an old time curling broom. I don't know if you know much about curling, but they had these long brooms, and you would beat the ice with them, and it's a sport. I'm in Canada, so that was a sport they would have played
Okay.
in winter. And but it was an old time broom. They don't make these brooms much anymore. So this is what I was seeing. And I thought, okay, well, I have your grandfather here. He's talking about when they used to play curl on the old rinks. And she said, no, no, I don't, that doesn't make sense. He didn't curl. I went, oh, that's strange. Okay, because it was so strong. And I said, okay, well, he's kind of making me aware that your father, who was still alive, I said, isn't taking his blood pressure medicine. Oh, I don't think he's on any. I said, okay, well, I don't know what to do with that. But, so we continue on. I said, well, you would understand your grandfather passed when you were 12. Yeah. I thought, okay, well, I can't do anything about it. I know we curled, can't really convince her of it. But I said, but before she left, so then we talked about more stuff about her. And then I said, well, please, would you mention to your father about his dad, your grandfather, and the curling and the blood pressure pills? So anyway, I felt like that sucked. I thought, oh my God, I just suck. Why am I doing this? This is like terrible. I'm not connecting properly because she was gone already. And this is in my early days, right? And then she texted me and said, oh my God, turns out my grandpa won the Briar, which is like an award for curling. So he did curl and he won a national championship or something. So he was
Wow.
really big. But the thing is, that was back when he was young. So she wouldn't have remembered that. But her
Yeah.
dad did because it was his dad
Mhm.
and he wasn't taking his blood pressure pill. She didn't realize he was on it. So there was the message was strictly for dad, take your damn pills and from his father. So it was so important to that just did so much for me when she responded and said, "No, you know what? You were right. I just didn't know."
Right, right,
So it was important for me to go, okay, so I need to trust this. I
right.
need to, that's where that, sense of surrender comes in.
hmm And it's not easy. It's not an easy process. Is there anything that I haven't discussed that you would like to share that we haven't topic that we haven't talked about or?
I think we've talked a lot about a lot of stuff. I hope it wasn't too scattered. I tend to go all over the place.
No, it's been
That's an Aries for
wonderful.
you.
No, and it's really interesting. And I think if somebody's just getting into it, it's good to hear other people's stories. It gives you that much more confidence. And I'm hoping in the future you would like to do an interview again. So thank you very much. So for
Well,
being
thank you so
willing.
much for having me. It was a real treat. Thank you.
Okay, talk to you later.